What is going on, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in to yet another Cyber Alert podcast that I'm putting together for you guys. This is a continuation of the last train wreck, if you will, that I put together last week around ConnectWise's now um, ConnectWise Connect, which we know as ScreenConnect, where it's a remote tool, and we was having some problems showing where Backstage is running everything as system, or you can better run anything you want to as system within Backstage, including browser and stuff like that, and some of the major problems with that. Since that video, I've been having many conversations with other MSPs, MSSPs, IT vendors, things of that nature, and sounding the alarm bell. And this is kind of a continuation where I'm going to bring one of my very good buddies, Mark Minez, up, and he's going to kind of show or talk about some of the issues that he's having, some of the expanded problems that he's seeing inside of his infrastructure, and just help educate people to be more aware of these current situations. So, without further ado, Mr. Mark, how are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing all right, Eric. How are you doing?
Good, good. So, please introduce yourself to everybody.
Mark Menzies, I'm the president and CTO of Overview Technology Solutions. We're a hybrid solutions provider based out of Ronkonkoma, New York. We have presence in a bunch of states in the Northeast and Midwest, we're fairly security focused, and that's why we're here today.
Awesome. So, when you saw the video that I had posted a while back, and we had our monthly CMMC calls, things of that nature, I guess give me your reactions and kind of dive into your exploration of this problem.
I mean, at the end of the day, things running a system is not it wasn't something that I've considered a big deal. I figured it was a feature, not a bug. And then, the argument was made that, you necessarily shouldn't have this much access to a system that doesn't, necessarily audit everything that it's doing. And, over time on that CMMC call, my opinion changed a bit. You make a good argument. So just for context, we've been at ScreenConnect, now ConnectWise Control. We've been using it for the last 7 years. Automate, we've been using for the last ConnectWise Automate. We've been using for the last 10 years. Used to be, Lab Tech. And, I don't have any confirmation about anything that I'm going to go through from support. They haven't gotten back to me yet. But, from what I can find, well, just a little bit of a pretext here. So we use ConnectWise Control to, do what ConnectWise Control does very well. And, we have some clients that require consent, so we turn on consent. We have some clients that, because of the IRS 1075 rules, require connect reasons. So we need to audit that, document that rather, so it can be audited and reported on. And then also, we have Backstage as a feature too that we, since reviewing this, have, turned off for users in groups that log directly into our ScreenConnect server. And we're running both on premise, but, they're in Azure, but, on premise. So the challenge that so I immediately went in with my team, and we took any user group we have everything tied into Active Directory. We have single sign-on. We have, and we have used Duo as multi-factor authentication. So what we did is we went to all the groups and we just unchecked the box that says, basically to enable Backstage. We checked off the box, we unchecked it. And we did that for all the user groups because that's the only place we could really see to do it. And I was starting to talk to my team about this, telling them, hey, this is why we're doing this. And then other members of the team, who were part of that change process, mentioned why we're doing it and gave context and things like that. A few hours later, somebody approached me on my team and said, hey, just letting you know, Backstage still works. And I'm like, what do you mean? No, it doesn't. You're in this group. It shouldn't be working. And they're like, well, when you connect in from ConnectWise Automate using the integration, it still works. So I was like, that can't be right. And I was like, we changed that group. And then we realized very quickly, because we've done this integration years ago, and we reassess things periodically and such, but it never dawned on us that even though we have single sign-on wherever we can and this and that there's no sort of correlation between a user and ConnectWise Automate and ConnectWise control. And we've realized that over time, and we've made changes to permissions on the ConnectWise Automate side. But what we started to realize was that there's no way to disable Backstage globally at all. And the recommendation is to do it via groups. But you can it just doesn't work. There's no way to turn it off for anybody using the API integration from Automate into ScreenConnect. And it is what it is. Certain other features work, like consent, require consent still works when you use that feature. But other features like we figured out, at the same time that putting a login reason when going in, that doesn't work. So which is odd to us. I mean, it makes sense because it shows up in the web UI. But anyway, the point is that what we started to do is started to dig a little deeper, and you know how things get when you dig deeper. It's never good. So
you start opening the onion.
Yeah, unpacking that, you open a Pandora's box, and it's never good what comes out, and you really can't put it back in either. So what we ended up finding out was that there's a ton of global functions that just like you can't granularly control from the ScreenConnect side when using the Automate integration. And this is not a new integration. This thing's been around for 7 years. Whenever ConnectWise made that acquisition, maybe longer. I don't know.
Roughly.
Yeah. So this isn't new, but the state of RMMs and remote control was very different then than it should be now. There are different challenges that we have now, or the challenges have become less uncommon than they used to be. But I think that they would look, and again, I haven't gotten confirmation from support, but I found a bunch of things on support forums or feature requests basically for 2-3 years ago stating this as such, and the answer being, oh, okay, which it doesn't make me feel good. So so I went through every setting in ConnectWise control. I can't find a way to globally disable Backstage. There's quite a few ancillary settings globally related to Backstage, such as I'm just going to look it up here really quick. Let me see here. Yeah, there's a ton of global functions like auto consent if you're going into Backstage mode, or preventing somebody from having to consent twice, basically, if you have the consent feature turned on. So you can consent in, and so that's the thing related to Backstage that's in there. If Backstage is the default way to remote in to not bother your end user, that's in the feature there that's globally available. But there is no feature to turn it off globally. And what that says to me, again, zero confirmation on this, I kind of figured this morning, is that there's some sort of maybe feature that's tied into the same backend systems that work with Backstage that is critical for ScreenConnect to function. Maybe, I don't know, because I can't see any other reason that they wouldn't allow you to turn it off. It wasn't always a feature. I don't believe it was always a feature.
No.
And they put it in at some point, but they didn't give us the ability to turn it off if we didn't want to have that feature set. So that's a thing. And I got concerned about that. And of course, when going through the settings, you start realizing going through and you have that security helmet on, you start seeing those, start looking at the ConnectWise control and ConnectWise manage integrations. And
so for those who don't know, if we can just put a stop right there real quick. So those who don't know, if you have a specific RMM, we'll just throw another one out that I recently used, like Datto. If you have CentraStage, there's an icon inside of the RMM tool that you would click and it will automatically open up your ScreenConnect. And that's what Mark is talking about today. So when you're in LabTech or ConnectWise Automate, as they call it now, there's a little button there that you can boom or click, and it brings you right in. So there's an API integration from Automate into Control. That way, it makes it seamless for your technicians to be able to remote in and start helping, which is on the surface a great productivity. So you don't have to log into yet another portal. When you're going through this, Mark, granted, I already know this answer, but are you able to limit the API? I think you were mentioning that a little bit before, and when you were talking about the form requests and things like that. But can you give that answer to what your understanding of it right now?
So the integration works on the ScreenConnect side by adding an extension from the marketplace, basically, and that extension basically controls most of how this works, and and then you add an extension in Automate, and then you put API keys from both sides, basically. That's kind of how it works. I think it's both sides. At least you have to take one from Control and put it in on the Automate side. But the point is that on the way that you control any of this, normally from a permission standpoint, is you add roles and you restrict the roles. And then those roles are tied to methods of user authentication and login, whether it be LDAP, SAML, whether it's local user, something like that. And that's how we control things. There's no such role for anybody coming in through the API. A, B, so we can't set some of those things. B, there's no option to limit what that API integration gives access to. And what I mean by that is that there's no in the extension in the market, when you look in the marketplace and you configure it, there's nothing in there that says, well, we want anybody coming in from Automate to be able to do anything but Backstage, but this, but that. There's no options there for limiting. There are options to limit things like IP addresses, maybe this, the server. There's things like that, and which is great, and we're happy about that. But the thing is that what I'm seeing and what I think what's happening is that they're giving full unfettered access to anything on the with that API key, which means that there's zero restrictions, and which is kind of scary if you look at it on the other side, the other side of this integration on the Automate side. There are restrictions that you can put into place, which means that basically ConnectWise is relying on the ConnectWise ecosystem is relying on it's not relying on that information source, that access source to do permissions and access control and things like that. It's relying on the other side, which kind of scares me. It's not really how I think it should be. It's like a workstation dictating terms over how a domain controller allows to, you're allowed to log into, authenticate to a domain controller or something like that. That's how I'm kind of seeing it. Put it in, I guess, more layman's terms. It's like, I don't know. It makes me very uncomfortable and it doesn't make sense. And that being said, I've looked at almost every setting on the Automate side, whether it be from the actual integration itself into ScreenConnect, which now has an API key. It didn't used to. It used to be a user, to the granular controls that you can give to users. And I can't see a place to limit Backstage. There are many more options to limit, usage, but none of them equate directly to Backstage at all, which, it's a little scary. And, again, I think I was mentioning when going through all this, I realized that all the API, keys, both the secret and the key itself, they're plain text visible. It's stuff we put in a few years ago. They're right there. So that means that anybody with admin access, which is limited in our organization, obviously to just internal sysadmins, but they can go in and grab a key, manage. You generate a key and manage gives you the key, and then you have your passphrase, and then as soon as you save it, it's obfuscated. You can never get it back. You have to regenerate the key. Most integrations that we use, you have an API key. You can maybe see the key itself, like you can see like the that key name or whatever you want to call it. I'm not using the technical term right now, but you can't see what the secret is.
Exactly.
So, and so it's I'm surprised that that's still in plain text. It scares me. And so I guess my argument here is that I'm not sure why some of our vendors are a little tone deaf on this. It doesn't seem like a difficult feature to implement to disable, this Backstage globally. It doesn't seem like a difficult feature to mask or obfuscate a API key or something like that, unless there are fundamental design flaws with this, which is even scarier because that is where exploits live. from what I've seen, those are the kinds of things that can be exploited fairly easily due to other potential design flaws if that's what they're using to get something done. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
It makes me very scary because I do remember what you were saying a moment ago, where when I was with LabTech, and we had that ScreenConnect integration where it was that username and password, and you could be able to limit some of the stuff when you married it to a certain user versus other users inside of ScreenConnect before ConnectWise got their hands on them. And that was one way of doing things, but the one thing that really scares me to some degree, and this is really no formal basis or information on this, but if you have a integration that you can be able to see both the pair and the secret of the API key, I'm really wondering if that is being transmitted over the wire in plain text as well. Because a lot of times when you start seeing that, if you start putting a Burp Suite or a FIDO or any sort of proxy interpreter inside of your workstation to start looking at all the logs, I'm starting to wonder if some of that stuff is there. But again, I don't want to start causing enough stuff because don't get me wrong, we have seen in the past couple of weeks, at least on DFIR side, we're seeing more and more ScreenConnect servers that are hosted in ConnectWise being popped more and more. Again, I'm not saying that there's a vulnerability, but there's something clearly going on potentially. And I know when I set up my trial for the ScreenConnect server, there's no MFA requirements at all when you set up your trial. There's not even hey, do you want to set up MFA or 2FA and you can exit out of it like a lot of the bigger vendors do? Like you're like, go away. No, I don't want to set this up type of thing. There's nothing for that at all. So this could be just very simply weak passwords, and they've got unfeathered access and could potentially compromise a whole bunch of their clients. But I did see yesterday or the day before there was a whole treasure trove of subdomains of hosted ScreenConnect servers that are sitting out on Pastebin right now.
Really?
Yeah, there was a ton of them put out there. I posted on LinkedIn. I submitted a request to abuse the Postbin abuse to see if they could take it down. I don't know if they will because there's really nothing abusive about it, but it's worth a shot. So I do think there's more and more plays against the ScreenConnect environment right now.
And it's like you said yourself, it's a great tool, and or I'm paraphrasing you rather, maybe in one of our calls, it's a great tool. It gives you extreme access to things. It makes everything super simple, but with great power comes great responsibility. I wanna kind of give a bit of pushback and then also take that pushback back. I don't think that the vendor should entirely rely on the vendor to force us to do best practices in security, like force us to enforce MFA. We as responsible parties should know to implement that in any system that we have. Put it into some sort of single sign-on. Have that identity, managed elsewhere. Have that multi-factor authentication. Have those other restrictions on login, based on conditional access and stuff like that, so that you're operating and logging in from a safe environment. However, we don't live in an ideal world. Even though it shouldn't be on the vendor to force us to do that, you might maybe have people who aren't familiar with all the security controls that you should put in place as a service provider, setting these up because maybe they're getting started, maybe they're learning something like that. So, from that perspective, I think the vendor, that falls more under vendor responsibility to not have their product abused, which is never really good PR also, as well. So it's, I have very strong feelings about that. And we're far from perfect. I don't think anybody's really perfect at this point. But it's it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, to push back on your pushback of the pushback, doing some more pushing. But if it is a standard procedure and everybody should be doing it, why not just have it from the start, and then everybody gets acclimated when you're setting up a new process or a new service or a new vendor. You just know these are the steps you're going to go through with any vendor of a certain caliber.
And I agree with you 100%. That's why I kind of gave pushback to my pushback, and I appreciate your pushback to my pushback's pushback. No. In all seriousness, I do agree that there should be this level of presumption that that you would be doing that. I think that where I might be coming from is that sometimes the default that you're enforced to use is their built-in one, instead of saying, "Hey, what do you use? Are you using third party? Like, are you using something like what was it, Duo?
Duo,
If you're using single sign-on, is your your single sign-on or you're protected with multi-factor authentication via some sort of conditional access? But that's the thing; these vendors have no visibility into what I'm doing on Azure AD side in terms of conditional access. They have no way to verify that. And I was talking to this about with some of our team members the other day. I was making an argument, in some ways that Duo and Microsoft's built-in. And I know this is not 100% accurate, but the Duo and Microsoft's built-in MFA, when acting solely as MFA with nothing else enabled, using conditional access as the only driver, the two are not too dissimilar, even though one's a third party and one's not. It's the conditional access policy that drives that security. And that conditional access policy is something that vendors have zero visibility into. So I see where they're coming from if they're doing it. But the point is, it's not like, and to your point, it should be the expectation that it's set up. And it's not the expectation that it's set up in many cases. And even if that expectation that's set up is guiding you through a wizard saying, hey, is your conditional access policy set up like this? Let's do some integration or something like that into Microsoft's ecosystem via Graph API or whatever to actually check your conditional access policy to see if it's set up in the right way that that is acceptable, in terms of best practices. I'd love to see something like that. I have yet to see something that actually checks conditional access from the vendor side to make sure your single sign-on is actually protecting you with MFA on that end, or other security controls. But I think it's a little bit pie in the sky. I don't think any vendors are ready for that yet. I could be wrong. I don't know if you know any that are doing that.
No, I don't know of any off the top of my head, but that does a little bit scare me because for a vendor to be able to properly check that, you're going to have to give them global admin rights to the tenant to be able to check that.
I can't speak to that. I would presume or hope at least you could give some sort of granular access.
Yeah.
Or some sort of PIM. I'm a little foggy in that area. If it's you could do service principal. I'm just throwing out words at this point, Eric. But at the end of the day, I'm just service principal. Everybody loves that word. No, but in all seriousness, I hope that it wouldn't have to be global admin. I would presume that maybe global reader would be like the highest that they would have to do. Maybe.
Yeah, actually, yeah.
Or yeah. So or some sort of other. I know Graph API is super granular, and I felt a lot more comfortable than I have in years past with clicking I accept going through and setting up enterprise apps in terms of what they have access to. I've seen some pretty granular stuff, so I wouldn't be surprised if if a vendor would set up things properly, that they could get only access to maybe certain things in terms of the conditional access policy, but then they'd also have to check other things as well that lead into that. Read users, read this, read that. So global reader isn't a huge stretch maybe for the requirement, but I highly doubt it. Global admin, unless you want them to fix it for you, press a button, they'll fit. But then I could screw everything else up. But anyway, I'd love to see some integration like that. Anyway,
I do know some vendors. CrowdStrike, I know, is doing it. It's an expensive product line. Their Falcon Fusion. I do believe Sentinel-1 is coming out with a product here soon, if they haven't already, that goes through and checks your Azure and things like that and looks for weaknesses and everything. So if you already got a trusted EDR platform, starting to leverage that into the XDR, you're extending the EDR into XDR, and that goes, they could be able to start potentially logging that stuff or looking at that stuff and seeing if you got some of the best practices put in for your Azure AD. But I guess I'll kind of circle back a little bit on the topic of, crapping. I like to crap on ConnectWise a little bit from time to time, just not as much as Kaseya.
I just want to make it very clear that we are absolutely not. I'm a little too political about this, but definitely not crapping on ConnectWise. I think that generally they make the effort, but I think that we need to be a little bit more critical about them in Kaseya and a lot of these vendors. We have to hold them accountable because we can't go in and change the code. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
No, you're exactly right. So that was going to lead to the question: have you been having other conversations with other MSPs, MSSPs, and helping drive the drum, if you will, to see if ConnectWise will make this change? Because as you stated before, you've seen it on some of the forums, but it's kind of gone on deaf ears.
Yeah, so this goes to the drive of who's on these advisory boards for these companies. I sit on the Pax8 advisory board. They have conversations. Seeing what I can say, they have conversations that relate to security more often than you'd think, that are partner facing, for us at least. All positive stuff, all looking for feedback. It's good stuff, and I think that they make an effort to do that. I think that there are things that are to be desired, and I'm sure you can ask Matt Lee that, he'd say the same thing. But at the end of the day, I want anybody who's maybe on one of the ConnectWise advisory boards or product advisory boards for ScreenConnect or Automate. I'm under the impression there's one for each product. That's how it seems to me, at least. To maybe bring this up and say, hey, you start pushing and saying, hey, this is something that we are advocating for. The community wants it. We need it. I don't know how expensive it is to have the talent internally to make these changes, if the talent still exists. I sure as hell hope so. Within their ecosystems, or if they have to reach out to third party. I don't know how any of that works at the end of the day. But what I do know is that this is the type of stuff that they should be looking at their product and making sure that that the product chimes true to like what the security threatscape is like today. They need to I'll go there. In terms of things like cancel culture, right? Like really quick, just jumping into that. Something that somebody says 10, 20 years ago might not, come off the same way today as it does. And that's okay, because our society changes and things change. It's fine. I feel like vendors should handle things in much the same way. In terms of like, that not that a vendor would be canceled necessarily, because we've seen that any vendor that would get canceled at this point probably would have at this point, from a technical perspective I'm talking about. But I'm not sure why things aren't handled like that. Why this, like, oh, we've put it in, it's, it's done. Why isn't this looked at? Why isn't this evaluated? Isn't that part of the software development lifecycle is reevaluation? I'm pretty sure it is. So why isn't that being done? And if it is being done, how come it's not on a roadmap? This isn't new stuff. I didn't discover this. I found this I discovered it in the same way that multiple people discovered America. I wasn't the first though. This is on forums years ago. So why wasn't it addressed at that point? So
squeaky wheel gets the grease type of thing. And MTech Computer Solutions, I see what you're saying. Rocket Cyber, I'll bring it up here for those who may be on LinkedIn or whatever, or Twitter, who may not see it, right? So Rocket Cyber at one point was a really, really good product until they got big and decided to sell to Kaseya. Until then, Kaseya is not touching anything close to my environment. I don't care. So
tell us how you really feel.
Yeah, Kaseya can go. Yeah, that's a different podcast for a different day. But if you ever watch,
we use Kaseya products internally. I mean, we're not. Listen, you see, and Eric, you know me long enough to know that one of my goals is to try to be an evangelist for change. I want to see rising tides raise all ships. I want to make sure that, like, someone, like, there needs to be people in our ecosystem that are extremely critical of our vendors, and it will shit on them. And that's one of your places, and you need to exist. There also needs to be those that are evangelists for vendors to try to open up the conversation as well, like ambassadors or whatever you feel. I feel that I'm more in that sort of boat. And that's a good thing for everybody, because rising tides raise all ships. We need the criticism. We need that sort of that radical candor is extremely important. That honesty, that openness that you bring and you provide is extremely important. We also need those that can then go ahead and bridge the gap, because, we might get on a call with Kaseya and be like, yeah, that asshole always blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Eric, he likes to tell the truth. What the hell's wrong with him? But like, let's
he has a
point. Oh, yeah, exactly. That's sort of like meeting in the middle. And that's one of the roles I try to bring both to our organization and to, like, the vendors that we work with, because, we all have to have these roles. We have to play this game to force improvement in our ecosystem. So again, rising tide, raising all ships. That's one of our goals here.
I think one of my guys just renamed my company.
Cyber
Devils again.
So I was doing Eric. I was doing a presentation last night in front of a group of very interested individuals at the Nassau Suffolk Water Commissioners Association. I think I got that right. And but they deal with things like critical infrastructure, our water, and things we drink. They said last night, everybody drinks water. It's not political, and I'm on the same page with that. But it's really funny, because the one of the things I brought up last night was someone asked me a question about vulnerability scanning and penetration testing, and we had to kind of do a little bit of a deep dive on that. There are different levels of all these things, that these terms could be used to whatever. And then I said, I used as an extreme example of pen testing from the physical perspective. I was like, I know a guy, his name's Eric Taylor, and he's the guy that would get your security cameras disabled and end up outside of your office with a crowbar at 3 a.m. So that's so now's a group of people who now know about this mythical Eric Taylor, and they're going to be making sure their cameras are reporting in that you're not outside their office at 3 a.m. with a crowbar.
Oh my gosh. The stunts that I pulled, and why I'm not allowed at conferences anymore. It's amazing. But anyway,
I channel your energy, though. I do.
So I guess to circle back on topic, because we are getting to that 30-minute mark. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, including our own. Going in here into the Thanksgiving holidays. So, what has your organization done to help prevent and mitigate this risk until?
It's a really good question. So, we have on our, I think in the next couple hours, you're probably gonna have the call. On our, as part of our as a part of our CAD process, we're gonna probably disable the integration between Automate and Control. I don't feel comfortable with half-assing implementing the Control to disable, Backstage and everywhere except for the integration between the two. Makes no sense to me. Is it gonna piss people off? It's gonna piss a couple techs off. I'm going to have to apologize to a bunch of people and say, hey, I don't feel comfortable keeping this on right now, because we would be hypocritical if we kept it on. We're half-assing implementing control that we made a decision on. And I don't want to go back and show my team, hey, it turns out it's a little more difficult than I thought. Don't worry about it. It's probably fine. That's not the stance we have to take. We have to take, well, you know what? We have to hold them accountable in some way, shape, the vendor accountable. And by doing that, we're going to maybe piss off a couple of our internal engineers. It is what it is. At the same time, it also takes care of that issue where that connection reason being listed or typed in, we don't have that through the integration either. So, there's an audit. When those logs are sent out, to those requiring that, connection reason as part of their compliance, if there's a whole bunch of blanks, it's not going to look good. So, we're disabling the integration as of sometime today, likely. So that's how we're handling it. Turn it off.
Well, if you are in the ConnectWise ecosystem and you see this, please do us a favor. Take a look at this integration that we're talking about with the Backstage and try to limit this. If you're seeing the same problems that we're presenting and Mark has this demonstrated, please reach out to Mark, reach out to whoever. Let's raise the voice. Let's try to get this problem fixed so it removes that gap. So if you're putting those control policies in place for your auditing and limiting your technicians from having too much power, this will make your business secure all the way around, right? So any parting words today, Mr. Mark?
I mean, listen, if I'm wrong and don't know what the hell I'm doing and can't read documentation, please call me out on it immediately. Be like, hey, it's like right here. But I looked pretty thoroughly, I think, and my team looked for it, and we can't find a feature to turn it off. Whether it might just be an undocumented feature or something in the web config file, possibly. We didn't dive that deep, but and support hasn't answered us yet. But, tell me I'm wrong. I love being wrong.
And with that, thank you so much, Mark. I appreciate it, buddy. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. Until next time, take care.
Bye, everybody.
There once was a kid whose passwords laid across all sites. They were the same. A criminal then found their fame by taking that data to go.
Soon may a criminal come to steal your pictures and data and run. One day when the crime is done, they'll steal your account and go.